the focus here in question time this afternoon, certainly the focus of Labor. They've gone back to the pursuit of the Minister for Energy and Emissions Reduction, Angus Taylor, over his family's holding of a property in his electorate affected by an endangered listing on some grassland. Now, to go through the details of why Labor's demanding the minister resign or be sacked, I'm joined by the Shadow Minister for the Environment and Water, Terri Butler. Thanks for your time this afternoon.
Thanks for having me, David.
So what are the grounds for this call for him to go?
Well, there's a range of concerns that we have, of course. This is a minister who had a personal interest in a piece of property that was being investigated for some poisoning of an area where there's critically endangered species. There's, in fact, about 19 endangered species that share that area, including the earless dragon. And the department has had some concerns about it. There was a compliance investigation. The minister met with environmental department officials in March last year.
March 2017.
I'm sorry, 2017, you're quite right. And there was compliance officials present at that meeting. Obviously, our concern is several. One, it's become very clear that the minister, in our view, had not disclosed his personal interest in this property to the department that was investigating it, including at that meeting.
Didn't the department since say, though, that they were aware of Angus Taylor's interest here? The
question is actually what the minister's conduct was, because there's a ministerial code of
well, surely the question is whether the department knew he had a farm, whether he had a holding.
Yeah. Well,
they say they did.
This is actually a question, I think, of transparency and accountability on the part of a minister. You see, we have to be, as the public, we have to be able to be confident that ministers will act appropriately and not seek to use their public position for private gain. Now, if you're a minister, you don't roll into a departmental meeting about an issue that you have a personal interest in, where there's a compliance investigation in relation to the thing that you've got a personal interest in. There's a compliance person sitting in the meeting.
But again, didn't the department say that compliance issue was not discussed?
Well, it's what's, I guess, the question there is they say that there was a compliance person present. It was the Minister for Environment at the time, Josh Frydenberg's office, who had requested that there be a compliance person present. At the same time, Minister Taylor didn't say anything about the fact that he had a personal interest. This was the only compliance investigation.
But again, surely the bottom line is the department were aware of his interest. The department say that the compliance matter wasn't discussed.
Well, the bottom line is this. The meeting occurred, which it shouldn't have done in the absence of a declaration. The minister has subsequently told the House that he had made all of the right declarations, which it seems clear he had not done.
Well, why do you say that?
Well, because we undertook an FOI. That came back with the department saying, no, they've got no record of any declarations being made.
Of Jamland, but he did disclose the parent company.
Yes, but his obligation as both a minister and a member of parliament is to disclose his interests. The parliamentary register requirement is that you disclose any personal interests, including the subsidiary of any holding companies in which you have shares. Not to mention, if you've got a pecuniary interest in something, then you wouldn't actually want a situation, David, where ministers could avoid their substantive obligation to disclose through clever corporate structures. I don't think that would be in anyone's interest. So there's the question of whether he disclosed, which it seems very clear to us. It's not just the FOI application that we made. There was an answer to a question or notice as well that showed that the Environment Department had no record of the declaration being made. But this is a minister who's told the House that he'd made all the declarations that he should have made. At the same time as that, we then have a situation when we first started questioning about this in the House, where the minister said that he had no association with this company. He later tried to recast what he said to say he had no association with the investigation, but that was an attempt to mop up a situation where he had misled the House about whether he had an association with the company.
Yeah, okay.
And I guess finally, in terms of this question of what we say has been another failure of his obligations as a minister, we have been asking him, all right, if you claim to be representing constituents, who are they? He's given us a range of different explanations.
You want him to name names?
No. We want him to produce... His best answer was, I met a bloke in Yass. Well, you don't need to tell us who it was, but provide us with a note of the meeting or a piece of correspondence. You can redact it, no problem. It's frankly unbelievable. He said, the bloke in Yass, he pointed to a letter which turned out to be from after the date of the meeting.
Do you think it's unbelievable that there would be farmers concerned about this listing?
The reason I think it's particularly unbelievable is because he fessed up on radio in July this year. He finally came clean and said, me, I'm the person.
Well, he said he is amongst the farmers concerned about this.
And his property, the property in which he had a personal interest, was the only one under investigation at the time, David. It's a situation where he has not been able to identify the constituents he says he's representing. As I said, he had a bloke in Yass, he had some unnamed farmers and unknown numbers. He pointed to a letter that was post-dated by several months after the meeting that he had with the department in March. There has been a series of questions about whether he's
series of questions, but again, I come back to what the department has said, that they were aware of his interest, that the compliance matters weren't discussed during that meeting. Isn't that good enough if the department was okay with how it all unfolded?
Well, no, because this is not a question. This is actually not a question about whether the department is satisfied. This is a question about whether the people of Australia can be satisfied that ministers are being held to the high standards that are set through the Ministerial Code of Conduct. And the reason that we have disclosure obligations is to avoid an actual conflict of interest or the perception of a conflict of interest. And in a time when trust in democracy is at a pretty low ebb, I think most people would agree, we actually need ministers to do the right thing. So firstly, it's the making of the disclosures, but secondly, it's to be honest with the House of Representatives, to front up and be honest about whether or not you've done these things, and to say in the House that he had no association with the company, that he'd made all the declarations that he needed to make, and the other representations that he's made in the House, including most recently that he was representing, as I say, maybe unknown numbers of unnamed farmers, but ultimately saying on radio in Illawarra, when he hoped no one was listening, that it was actually about his own interests, suggests that he has not been frank.
All right. Do you really think there's enough, though, to sustain this pursuit of Angus Taylor? I mean, the Prime Minister's showing no concern here. He's certainly not going to move against Angus Taylor. There's been no smoking gun produced to show that he's definitely, hidden something.
Well, on two things. Firstly, the Prime Minister was given the opportunity to defend Angus Taylor in question time today, said not one word in defence of his minister. Now, I admit this is the Prime Minister who, when he hugs you, you know you're in trouble. I admit that. But this was a serious matter of a censure motion that was sought to be moved by Anthony today. The Prime Minister got up and yelled about Labor. Not a word in defence of his minister, not a word of support, just more bloviating about the Labor Party.
Well, his point was, if we're going to talk integrity, Labor's got a few issues in New South Wales right now. But look, I
think he had some few issues with Damien Mantak.
All right. Let me ask you on another matter. There's been an increasing concern amongst farmers in the Murray-Darling about so-called water hoarding, water barons who may not own any land but are trading and profiting on the water trading market. Do you think it is time to end the system that allows trading of water by people who don't own any land? Should the two be tied back together?
I think this is a really important question. The water market design has been in place now for a very long period of time. The market has matured, there are new players, and it's quite a new phenomenon in my view to see big corporate water giants hoarding water to this extent and the level of public concern that we're seeing about speculators in the market. That's what's new here. But the market design has been around for a very long time.
So time for a change?
Well, the Minister has referred the matter to the ACCC. I've said, got no difficulty with the ACCC looking at something, but that's not enough because the question isn't really a competition question.
So what should happen here?
Well, let me just say this. It's not really whether the market's sufficiently competitive, it's whether the market design suits the national interest. And that is a question that goes beyond the question of competition. That's the first thing. The second thing I'd say is it can't be an opportunity for the Minister to take no action and pass the buck to the ACCC. So what needs to happen is the Minister actually needs to consult with communities, take a look at the market design, look at international examples. We're not the only market, of course, in the history of the world.
But bottom line, does Labor think you should be able to buy and sell water without owning land?
Well, as I said to you, this is a question that's a live question.
What do you think?
Well, I think that the Minister, who's got the resources of government, should actually step up and take a proper look at this and not pass the buck to the ACCC.
The system right now isn't working.
I am very concerned about water speculators. I think there has been some very strong criticism, rightly so, about the fact that water entitlements are able to be hoarded while the price goes up at the same time as you have got irrigators, farmers, environmentalists and Aboriginal people who have a legitimate expectation that water will be available for their use.
Shadow Minister for Water and the Environment, Terri Butler, thank you for joining me this afternoon.
Thanks, David.